legislation submitted to the New York State Legislature would effectively create internment camps for those the governor thinks pose a serious health risk. The rights of the people of New York State would be ignored, infringed, and destroyed based solely on the opinion of the governor or his delegate. This order would require those in New York State to submit to medical testing, treatments, and vaccinations based solely on the order of the governor or his delegate. And we'll discuss that next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study. We're going to be talking about my former home state of the Empire, New York, New York. Before we get that, please, I take these videos, share them, like, subscribe, get the word out. Social media is working very hard to keep me from getting these messages out, so I need you to help me do that. The more you can like and share these on social media, the better, and I do truly appreciate it. But if you really want to be engaged with the Constitution Study, then head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Everything you find there, all my videos, all my articles are there for you to use and for you to share, and they're absolutely free. If you're looking for articles on and find it there, hey, you're trying to explain something to Uncle Homer and you can't find the right words. Maybe it's in an article, or you've got somebody online that you're trying to explain how the election works and you're stumbling. Send them a link to the video. That's what it's there for. It is all there. Now, if you like that and you want to support that, then please feel free to donate over at the website. If you click the donate button or just go to constitutionstudy.com/donate, all of that money goes to keeping the study up and running. It keeps the website going, it keeps the videos, the podcast, it pays for the hosting, for the software, so that I can continue to put out these videos, to put out the podcast, to write these articles, so that you have the information you need to help live a free and liberty-based and rights-based life. Now, if you want to engage more, then consider heading over to constitutionscholars.com. I'll talk more about it at the end of the video, but that is the community where other people who are interested in the Constitution can read and study together and share what they know and what they've learned, both within the group and outside of the groups. Again, constitutionscholars.com. It is free to sign up. It's not a free trial. You sign up, it's free. You don't have to pay a dime. But for now, let's talk about the Empire. Having lived most of my life in the Empire State and still having friends and family there, I found Assembly Bill 416 to be more than just disturbing. I found it both frightening and disgusting. Why? Because it reminds me of some of the most despotic and egregious violations of human rights in history. It seems Santayana was correct. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. New York Assemblyman N. Nick Perry, who represents the East Flatbush area of Brooklyn, New York City, has introduced Assembly Bill 416, or A416, with the following purpose, quote, an act to amend the public health law in relation to the removal of cases, contacts, and carriers of communicable disease who are potentially dangerous to the public health. As so often seems the case, those calling for the destruction of citizens' rights claim to be doing so for the public safety. In this case, to protect you from those who are carriers of potentially dangerous diseases. Now, is there a role for state governments to protect their citizens from modern typhoid Marys? Yes, but not at the expense of the rights of the people or the abandonment of the constitutions of the state or the United States, which is exactly what A416 would do if enacted and enforced. Well, let's look at probable cause. Quote, the people of the state of New York, represented in the Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Upon determining by clear and convincing evidence that the health of others is or may be endangered by a case, contact, or carrier, or suspected case, contact, or carrier of a contagious disease that, in the opinion of the governor, after consultation with the commissioner, may pose an imminent and significant threat to the public health, resulting in severe morbidity or high mortality, the governor or his or her delegee, including but not limited to the commissioners or the heads of local health departments, may order the removal and or detention of such a person or of a group of such persons by issuing a single order identifying such persons either by name or by reasonably specific description of the individuals or group being detained. Mr. Perry wants the people of New York to grant the governor or his delegate the authority to lock up people in their state if, in the opinion of the governor or his delegate, there is clear and convincing evidence that they may be a risk to others due to a communicable disease. While this legislation is couched in some nice legal-sounding language like determining by clear and convincing evidence, it is a blatant violation of our most basic human rights. Let's take a look at some of the ways this legislation would violate not only the rights of the people of New York, but of the constitutions of both the state and of the United States. Now, Article 1, Section 12 of the New York State Constitution reads, quote, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." Article 1, Section 12 of the New York State Constitution mirrors the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Specifically, it's supposed to protect the people of New York from unreasonable searches and seizures. It does this by requiring warrants to perform such searches and seizures and that they meet certain criteria. First, there must be probable cause. Now, the Free Legal Dictionary defines probable cause as, quote, "Probable cause is a level of reasonable belief based on facts that can be articulated that is required to sue a person in civil court or to arrest and prosecute a person in criminal court. Before a person can be sued or arrested or prosecuted, the civil plaintiff or police and prosecutor must possess enough facts that would lead a reasonable person to believe that their claim or charge is true." Now, at first, it might appear that by requiring the governor or his delegate to have clear and convincing evidence, they would meet the requirement for probable cause. But notice that the New York Constitution requires that the probable cause be supported by oath or affirmation. That means that someone has to swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the clear and convincing evidence is not only real, but something they were a witness to or have direct evidence of. Not only is there no requirement that the government or his delegate actually get a warrant or any court order, and they are not required to swear or affirm under any penalty that the evidence is clear and convincing, all that this legislation requires is that clear and convincing evidence be in the opinion of the governor, a clear violation of the constitutions of both the state of New York and the United States. Second, any warrant must particularly describe the place to be searched and the persons and things to be seized. Tell me, how can someone particularly describe the person to be seized when the standard in the legislation is, quote, "identifying such persons either by name or by reasonably specific description of the individual or group being detained"? What is a reasonably specific description of an individual? And at what point does a reasonably specific description of a group become anything but a general warrant? Is membership in the synagogue that sued the city for their right to exercise their religion a reasonably specific description? What about those who live in a nursing home or work in a certain location or are just believed to have gone to a park? Is that a reasonably specific description for you to be detained or interned? Do you really want your freedom to be based on how reasonably specific some political bureaucrat describes your group? Furthermore, you don't even need to be served with one of these illegal orders. Quote, "A copy of any detention order the governor or his or her delegee issues pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section shall be given to each detained individual. However, if the order applies to a group of individuals and it is impractical to provide individual copies, it may be posted in a conspicuous place in the detention premises." That's right. If you're believed to be in one of these groups that have been targeted for detention, you don't even have to be served before you're taken into custody. Will people be taken from their homes, work, schools, or just swept up off the streets only to find out later that they were accused of being subject to an illegal detention order? Hasn't Mr. Perry heard of this little thing called due process? See, the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution states, quote, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." Maybe the confusion comes from the fact that I could not find the words due process in the New York Constitution. However, it is part of the supreme law of the land, the Constitution of the United States of America, a document, by the way, which Mr. Perry was required to support in his oath of office. So what is this due process and why does it matter? Well, again, from the Free Legal Dictionary, due process is, quote, an established course for judicial proceedings or other governmental activities designed to safeguard the legal rights of the individual. So due process is a process that makes sure you get what you are due. In other words, for a process to be due, it must protect the rights of the individual. It's unfortunate this legislation does nothing of the sort. Quote, a person or group removed or detained by order of the governor or his or her delegee pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section shall be detained for such period and in such manner as the department may direct in accordance with this section. There is no trial by jury, no presentment of evidence, no right to confront your accuser, to challenge the evidence, or even to have the assistance of counsel. If the governor or his delegee issues the order, you simply go to jail. You do not pass go, and you certainly don't collect $200. Again, from A416, quote, when a person or group is ordered to be detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section for a period not exceeding 3 business days, such person or member of such group shall, upon request, be afforded an opportunity to be heard. If a person or group detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section needs to be detained beyond 3 business days, they shall be provided with an additional commissioner's order pursuant to subdivision 2 and 8 of this section. How generous of the New York legislature. If you are illegally detained, you get the opportunity to be heard, but only if you're requested. And just who will hear the case? Some bureaucrat from a local health department? The governor of one of his designees? See, there is no requirement here that your case be heard in public by a competent court, much less a jury of your peers, as required by the constitutions of both the state of New York in Article 1, Section 2, and the United States in Amendment 6. Furthermore, the legislation reads, quote, when a person or group is ordered to be detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section for a period exceeding 3 business days, and such person or member of such group requests release, the governor or his delegee may make an application for a court order authorizing such detention within 3 business days after such request by the end of the first business day following such Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, which application shall include a request for an expedited hearing. After any such request for release, detention shall not continue for more than 5 business days in the absence of a court order authorizing detention. Notwithstanding the foregoing provision, in no event shall any person be detained for more than 60 days without a court order authorizing such detention. Finally, we see the courts involved, but only if you are detained for more than 3 business days. Then the governor can apply for a court order, has up to 3 business days to do so, and the court has another 5 business days to issue the order. So even if you request release the day you are interned, it can take over a week before either a court issues an order or the governor is forced to release you. See, in America, we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. In Mr. Perry's New York, you are guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. So much for the right to petition your government for a redress of grievances. Again from A416. Such person or group of persons shall be detained in a medical facility or other appropriate facility or premises designated by the governor or his or her delegee in complying with subdivision 5 of this section. See, back in 1942, President Roosevelt ordered the Secretary of War to have military areas created for the detention of those who, in the opinion of the military, could be a national security risk. Now Mr. Perry wants Governor Cuomo to create medical areas for the detention of those he thinks may carry a dangerous disease. Have we truly learned nothing from history? Roosevelt's camps were used to intern innocent Americans simply because they were of Japanese descent. Does anyone in the New York State government see what Mr. Perry is proposing are internment camps just for another purpose? In a state with a history of using the power of the state to force their citizens into compliance, do we really think these camps will not be used to punish those who challenge Governor Cuomo's illegal orders? Will business owners who peacefully refuse to comply with illegal orders to shut down now be sent to camps? What about the religiously devout? Will they be sent to camps as well? Could the Empire State descend to the point where political disagreement about government overreach in the medical field becomes grounds for internment? I ask again, have we learned nothing from history? This sounds more like Stalin's Russia, Mao's China, or Pol Pot's Cambodia than a free country. Quote, A person who is detained in a medical facility or other appropriate facility or premises shall not conduct himself or herself in a disorderly manner, and shall not leave or attempt to leave such facility or premises until he or she is discharged pursuant to this section. Mr. Perry wants to make sure that when you are illegally detained and interned in an illegal camp, denied your rights and the protections of the law, that you behave yourself. Make no mistake, the internment camps Mr. Perry proposes are political prisons. Regardless of the excuse used, anyone in one of these camps is a political prisoner. They have been incarcerated under an illegal law that not only violates the Constitution of the state of New York, but of the United States, making that law void. As Chief Justice Marshall noted in the Marbury versus Madison opinion, quote, "Certainly all those who have framed written constitutions contemplate them as forming the fundamental and paramount law of the nation, and consequently the theory of every such government shall be that an act of the legislature repugnant to the Constitution is void." It seems to me the first duty of a political prisoner would be to escape from the prison camp and let the world know what's going on. And if all that wasn't bad enough, there's more. Quote, "In addition to the removal or detention orders referred to in subdivision 2 of this section, and without affecting or limiting any other authority that the Commission may otherwise have, the governor or his or her delegee may, in his or her discretion, issue and seek enforcement of any other orders that he or she deems necessary or appropriate to prevent dissemination or transmission of contagious diseases or other illnesses that may pose a threat to the public health, including, but not limited to, orders requiring any person or persons who are not in the custody of the departments to be excluded, remain isolated or quarantined at home or at a premises of such person's choice that is acceptable to the department and under such conditions and for such period as will prevent transmission of the contagious disease or other illness. To require the testing or medical examination of persons who may have been exposed to or infected by a contagious disease or who may have been exposed to or contaminated with dangerous amounts of radioactive materials or toxic chemicals. To require an individual who has been exposed to or infected by a contagious disease to complete an appropriate prescribed course of treatment, preventative medication or vaccination, including directly observed therapy to treat the disease and following infection control process for the disease, or to require an individual who has been contaminated with dangerous amounts of radioactive materials or toxic chemicals such that said individual may present a danger to others to undergo decontamination procedures deemed necessary by the department. Such person or persons shall, upon request, be afforded an opportunity to be heard, but the provisions of subdivisions 2 through 11 of this section shall not otherwise apply. The provisions of this section shall not be construed to permit or require the forcible administration of any medication without a prior court order. Not only does Mr. Perry want to give the governor the authority to intern you based solely on his opinion of the evidence, he apparently wants the Empire State to live up to its nickname. Mr. Perry proposes allowing the government to enforce isolation, quarantine, medical tests, treatments, decontamination, medications, vaccination solely at the discretion of the governor or his delegate. What do you call a person who lives at the whim of another? A person who has no legally protected right to themselves. Someone who can be forced to act against their will at the discretion of another. One term would be the subject of a king or emperor. In my opinion, a better term would be slave. I cannot describe just how disgusted I am that a servant of the people in America could even propose such despotic legislation. Mr. Perry's bill goes far beyond the tyranny that drove our founding fathers to war against their mother country. And as of the time of my recording this, not only is the legislation scheduled to be considered, but the people of the state of New York appear either unaware of what their government is considering or unwilling to even say something about it. Maybe those in Albany have so cowed their constituents that they can do whatever they want. Perhaps so many citizens of a once great state have become sheep, simply following their leaders into captivity. I pray that I am wrong. I pray that the people of New York remember their history, stand up to this attempt to repeat the mistakes of the past, and remove from office those who would even consider such an abuse of the people they serve and the oaths they have taken. If this doesn't disgust you, If this doesn't cause the hair in the back of your neck to stand up, I don't know what will. I mean, you're talking about a state that wants to intern their own citizens simply on the whim of a governor, that throws the constitutions right out the window, ignores due process, ignores the warrants and court orders. It just does whatever it wants, and the people at least appear to be lying down and taking it. Have the people of the Empire State become such slaves to their state government that they'll submit to this? Does freedom and liberty mean so little that this mere promise of being protected from something means we'll give it away? I did a video about how we sold our liberty for $600 checks. It appears in the state of New York, they don't even need that. Tell me, people of the state, I used to live in New York. I was born in New York City. I spent most of my life living in the state of New York. I am shocked that the people of the state of New York are like the people in Stalin's Russia. You might as well be sent off to the Gulag, because the only difference between the Gulag and what Mr. Perry's proposing is the work you're expected to do. If you can be sent to a camp, to some internment, simply on the word of a government official, you are not a free citizen. You are not even a serf. You are a slave. We should rename New York the slave state, not the Empire State. Although the Empire State does work pretty well for that. I am disgusted that there are people in my former home state that would allow this to happen, much less propose this. Does nobody remember the Japanese internment or the case of Karamatsu? Does nobody remember the stories of the camps from Stalin's Russia, from Mao's China, from Pol Pot's Cambodia? Does nobody remember these? Does nobody remember Siberia and the gulags? Really? Has it all just disappeared? Are we willing to emulate that simply because we've been scared to death about a virus that has a 98+% survival rate? I don't know what's happening to this country. And I have no idea what's happening in the state of New York. What I do know is that there should be people out there that are willing to stand up and fight. And I don't mean with guns and knives. We start by fighting with knowledge. So I'm going to encourage everyone who looks at this in disgust, head over to constitutionscholars.com, sign up, start learning what the Constitution says, and start learning what you can do to stop this from coming to your state. And if you live in New York, God help you, you better do it quick, because this legislation is already going through the process. It is in committee. And if it gets passed, and if it gets put into law, and you get thrown away because of it, it is your fault. If you stood up and did nothing, it is your fault. The phones in Albany should be ringing off the hook. The halls should be packed with citizens going, "What in God's name are you thinking?" And it's not. So if you've had enough, if you don't want to be a slave, if you want America to once again be the land of the free and the home of the brave, head over to constitutionstudy.com, head over to constitutionscholars.com. Get involved, learn, share. And if there's any value in what you've learned here today, then I hope I'll see you here next time at the Constitution Study.